The most sophisticated financial decision in American logistics right now is being made by a 58-year-old man in Amarillo, Texas, with grease on his hands and a 2004 Peterbilt in his driveway. Truck manufacturers posted their highest profit margins in 15 years in 2023. New semi-orders collapsed. Those two facts should not coexist, and yet they do. Because the men driving America's freight figured something out that Wall Street analysts are still trying to model. Dale Hutchins has been hauling refrigerated loads across the Southern Corridor for 31 years. In 2022, he walked into a Kenworth dealership, looked at the financing sheet, and walked back out. He still drives the same truck he bought used in 2009, and his accountant says he made the right call. There's a number buried in EPA compliance data that changes everything about how we think about this industry. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the trucker keeping a 20-year-old rig on the road is not falling behind. He's running the only math that actually works. There are 3.5 million truck drivers in the United States. Of those, roughly 1.9 million are owner-operators, men and women who own their equipment, carry their own insurance, and absorb every cost the market throws at them. 67% of those owner-operators are currently running trucks that are 15 years old or older. That is not a fleet management failure. That is a coordinated economic response to a system that made new equipment financially irrational. Dale's situation is the industry in miniature. He passed on the new Kenworth because the sticker price was $189,000. Before dealer markup, before the emissions compliance package, before the loan structure that front-loads interest so aggressively that he'd be paying finance charges larger than his fuel costs for the first 4 years. Instead, he spent $31,000 last year maintaining his 2004 Peterbilt, rebuilding the injectors, replacing the turbo, keeping the pre-emissions era engine alive, mile by mile. Dale's accountant ran the numbers, and the answer surprised even him. On the surface, that looks like a man who can't afford to upgrade. That's the story most people tell about aging fleets. It's also wrong, because the system that made new trucks unaffordable didn't happen by accident. It was built, piece by piece, by 3 separate forces converging on the same pressure point. But this is only the surface layer. To understand why American truckers are holding on to equipment that was built before smartphones existed, you have to go back to 2010. That's when the EPA finalized its Tier 4 emission standards for heavy diesel engines, the most aggressive clean air mandate ever applied to commercial trucking. The intent was legitimate. Diesel particulate pollution was measurable, harmful, and concentrated near freight corridors where working-class communities lived. The consequence was structural. Tier 4 compliance required an entirely new class of engine architecture: diesel particulate filters, selective catalytic reduction systems, exhaust gas recirculation. The technology worked, emissions dropped, but it added an estimated $12,000 to $18,000 per truck in manufacturing cost, and it introduced maintenance complexity that older diesel mechanics had never trained on. Truck manufacturers passed every cent of that cost to buyers. Then they added margin. New truck prices, which averaged around $110,000 in 2009, crossed $160,000 by 2016 and hit $189,000 by 2023. That's a 72% price increase in 14 years, roughly double the rate of general inflation. The financing industry followed. Loan terms stretched. Interest front-loading became standard. Costs compounded. Fast. Owner-operators who bought new trucks between 2016 and 2020 found themselves locked into monthly payments that left no margin for freight rate volatility. When spot rates collapsed in 2022, dropping 38% in under 12 months, those operators had no buffer. Hundreds walked away from their trucks. Repossessions spiked. Dale watched that happen to 3 men he knew from his Amarillo terminal. He kept his 2004 Peterbilt running, and he started tracking his cost per mile with the same discipline a CFO applies to a quarterly earnings call. But here's what most people get wrong. They assume Dale is making a sacrifice. They assume he's enduring the old truck because he can't afford the new one. That assumption misses the entire economic logic of what he's actually doing. Dale's 2004 Peterbilt costs him $31,000 a year in maintenance. That sounds catastrophic until you put it next to the alternative. A new Kenworth T680 at $189,000, financed over 60 months at current commercial rates, runs approximately $3,900 per month in principal and interest alone. That's $46,800 per year, before a single dollar of fuel, insurance, registration, or tires, before the DEF fluid the new emissions system requires, before the dealer-mandated service intervals that void the warranty if skipped. The industry average for maintaining a post-2010 Tier 4 compliant truck is $14,200 per year in compliance-specific maintenance alone. emissions filters, sensor replacements, regeneration failures that strand a truck mid-route and cost $2,400 on average to resolve roadside. This connects to something happening in used truck auctions right now, and it confirms what Dale's numbers already show. Pre-2007 trucks, the ones built before the first generation of modern emissions mandates, are selling at auction for 2 to 3 times their book value. Not because they're nostalgic, because they're mechanically simpler, cheaper to maintain, and immune to the compliance cost structure that is slowly bankrupting newer owner-operators. The counterintuitive turn is this: the 20-year-old truck is not the symptom of poverty, it is the business strategy. Dale's cost per mile on his 2004 Peterbilt runs at $0.14. The industry benchmark for a new Tier 4 truck, fully loaded with financing and compliance maintenance, runs at $0.21 to $0.23 per mile. On a driver logging 120,000 miles per year, that gap is worth $8,400 to $10,800 annually, every year, without exception, for as long as he keeps that old engine turning. That's more than most Americans earn in 2 months of full-time work, and Dale captures it simply by not buying what the industry is selling. The total deferred maintenance backlog across the owner-operator segment now sits at an estimated $2.4 billion industry-wide. Analysts read that as a crisis. Dale reads it as proof that he's not alone. The men keeping old trucks running aren't in denial about the economics. They've done the math more carefully than the analysts writing about them. Dale's accountant ran the numbers and confirmed what Dale already knew. The break-even point on a new truck at current freight rates is 8 years minimum. Most owner-operators don't survive year 3 of a new truck loan. The system wasn't designed to trap them, but it functions like it was. Here's the thing that truckers know and economists are still catching up to. The freight market does not reward sophistication. It rewards survival. And survival, in owner-operator economics, means controlling your fixed costs with a precision that most people in air-conditioned offices never have to apply to their own finances. Dale Hutchins isn't behind the times. He's ahead of them. He understood, before most financial analysts published a single word on the subject, that the new truck financing structure was built to extract margin from the people operating the equipment, not to help them build equity. That's the identity statement this industry never hears. Truckers aren't failing to modernize. They're refusing to be financialized. What most people don't realize is that the used truck market Dale participates in has become one of the most efficient capital preservation systems in American small business. No depreciation cliff, no compliance liability, no dealer relationship required for basic maintenance, a skilled diesel mechanic, and a parts network built over decades. There's a number buried in EPA compliance data that changes everything, and that number is the failure rate on Tier 4 DEF systems in high-mileage applications, 34% within the first 200,000 miles. On a new truck, that's a warranty claim. On a used pre-emissions truck, that problem doesn't exist. Which brings us to what happens next. Because the decision Dale made in 2022, and the decision that 67% of owner-operators are making right now, is creating a structural shift in the used equipment market, in parts supply chains, and in the freight capacity numbers that every shipper in America is watching. The used semi-market is tightening. Pre-emissions trucks are being bought, restored, and put back into service at a rate the industry hasn't seen in 20 years. Parts suppliers who specialized in legacy Cummins and Caterpillar engines that were supposed to be obsolete, are running back orders 3 months deep. The manufacturers built a system that assumed every trucker would eventually have no choice but to buy new. They did not account for the ingenuity of men who have been solving mechanical problems in parking lots at midnight for 30 years. Dale Hutchins will put another 150,000 miles on that 2004 Peterbilt before he considers any other decision. His operating margin is better than most small trucking companies running brand new equipment. The American trucker keeping a 20-year-old Peterbilt alive isn't losing. He's the only one in the supply chain who actually read the fine print.